What's up, everybody? 6 months into this journey on YouTube and podcasting, and I am still surprised, maybe blown away is a better term, how this nodal, digital, yet relational network continues to stretch this thread into a yarn of an experience, bumping into unexpected yet relatable people and ideas. Today, I am delighted to have James Taylor Foreman in the virtual studio. A friend I met at Jonathan Peugeot's Symbolic World, who prefers to remain anonymous, recently pointed me to a Substack called The Metaphor, operated by James Taylor Foreman, with his recent essay entitled Why I Am a Christian Again. As I began to read, I was transported into his story by his prose, while at the same time reverting back into certain parts of my own story, seeing, actually more like feeling the morphic resonant vibrations we had both ridden over the last 5 to 7 years. I instantly commented, set up a Substack profile and shot him a comment about this connection, specifically how certain people whose names that all begin with J profoundly influenced his reconnection to religious faith, and invited him to join me in a conversation about this story here on yours truly. James Taylor Foreman is a writer. His Substack profile reads, "These are stories, secrets, and reflections from the frontiers of hyper landscapes, metaphorical landscapes more real than physical ones. Getting lost out here is easier than ever, and I did." He continues, "I studied philosophy, Nietzsche, Emerson, and William James, and then worked in Silicon Valley, helping build tech companies, and Hollywood, a TV pilot. But more importantly, I never really left behind where I grew up, which happens to be the hot, muggy, deep south of Louisiana and Mississippi, which are places near and dear to this country boy's neck of the woods, just across the state line up in Arkansas. Last year, James also had a tweet thread, or Zeet thread, go viral, garnishing over 500,000 views. The initial tweet on the thread reads, "In the original Greek translation, Lucifer is called morning star or light bringer. Why is Satan, the pinnacle of evil, considered a bringer of light? You need to understand the story." We'll get into that and how going viral specifically impacted him, and more today as we unpack his journey in this corner of the internet, as we practice some conversation craft here on the Yours Truly podcast. So, without any further delay, I give you James Foreman, The Metaphor. Hi, this is Christian Baxter, and you're listening to Yours Truly, a place we go to think out loud. James.
Thanks for that introduction.
Yeah, that's fun, man.
Great.
It's fun.
Yeah, I'm sure it's nice. It gets your guests feeling, okay, I'm feeling pretty good.
Yeah. I've thought about, because I figured out, okay, I could pre-record this. I've been working with the software now more, and I'm like, you know what? But I think there's something to this kind of liturgy of, okay, yeah, that's why I'm here. That's why we're here. And I have not been much a writer in my life, but the discipline of making these introductions has really, it's been good for me. So, I don't know, it's fun. But yeah, here we are.
That's cool. Yeah, no, I think it's a good one. I think it's a good little ritual to kind of break the ice. I think it's nice. While you were talking, I put on this hat. And so not to surprise you, not a different person, but but I thought about, when I was putting it on, I thought about where I got this. I picked this up in Boston while I was visiting to see a Peterson lecture. And that was the only one I've ever seen. I was actually going there to reconnect with my nephew, who's about my age. He couldn't make it, so I was there by myself. But I was just thinking about that.
Yeah, Peterson, that's the connection. So I'm sitting there, as I was describing, someone pointed me in your direction, someone that's familiar with this whole milieu, and he was like, "This might make a good podcast." And I was like, hell yeah. I was like, as I read that, why I'm Christian again. That's the title, I think. Why I'm a Christian again. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a, go ahead.
That your story. Yeah. It was resonant deeply, maybe for different reasons, but again, this space you mentioned, going to see Peterson, so I mean, give us, the cliff notes of that story if you're okay with it, um, and like, yeah, how this space of meaning makers like Peterson, Peugeot, Vervaeke, you all hinted at like all of them in that essay, I think, and yeah, just how that all played together for you.
Well, I think we have a very similar story. When I saw your comment, before I knew really anything about, who you had spoken to or what your influences were, I just felt like a kind of resonance. Maybe it's partly because my brother's name is Christian, and actually, uh, his son is the nephew that I was going to see the lecture with. So
There you go.
um,
Symbolism happens, man.
that's true. But I there was I had a dark night of the soul, which I think you had as well, and it was sort of a time in my life where I was very much kind of a materialist, and I thought I was smart, and like I thought, like I thought because I was smart that I deserved something, or that like life was supposed to go a certain way, um, and so I was kind of resentful. And then I was living in Houston with my other brother Seth, and we were having a great time together in Houston for a little while there. And I was reading House of Leaves. Have you ever read House of Leaves by any chance? It's a book by it's not the most popular book, but it's a book by Mark Danielinsky. It's right here, and you can see that the text sort of like is part of the experience of reading it. There's like
Wow.
these strange portions and like all this strange formatting and whatnot. And the book is it's a very postmodern work. It's like there's there's layers. Like the book is about a book about a book, and then it's about a movie. It's kind of like meta. Um, and it does this thing to you where, as you're reading it and as you're going down these layers, you feel yourself to be the top layer, and it starts to kind of crack your feeling of reality. It's very good. I definitely recommend it, as far as postmodern works go. Um, but anyway, and it was really reflective of the sort of chaotic state of my psyche at the time. So, and I saw a video. That video, let me turn on my do not disturb so this doesn't bother me. That's going over there. I saw a video of Peterson talking to that woman. I can't remember her name. The English lady, I believe. Tell
GQ.
me.
Yeah.
GQ. That's right. That's right. GQ. And I really, really disliked him. And like something visceral just like made me go like, this guy is wrong. Like, and it was just like playing in my head just like constantly. And so I would watch it, and I like would kind of masochistically just like watch it and watch it and watch it. I felt like something about it was seriously bothering me. And I, looking back, it's like my life was seriously not organized well. And so it makes sense that what he was saying would bother me quite a lot. And I just kept listening, and it transformed from like, I really don't like what this guy stands for and who he is, and I need to listen so I can understand why he's wrong, to this is transforming my life. um, and it really like my whole life is completely different after kind of a few other things, but that I mean, like, I'm almost embarrassed to say it, but that was really the catalyst of a lot of change in my life, and eventually becoming Christian. And now I go to a church here in LA.
So was that, I'm looking it up, Jordan Peterson GQ, that was with, what was her name? Yeah, I'm looking it up right now so I can get that name on here. Goodness. Well,
He came across a bit
Helen
like
Lewis.
Hannibal. Yes, Helen Lewis.
Yeah, that is it. Pick his
Peterson
people.
came across a little bit like Hannibal Lecter in that interview. Not the most charming interview from Peterson, but definitely went on to be one of my heroes. So
Yeah.
great
Well,
introduction
he
for
came
me.
into that, I think, with his guard up, like,
Yeah.
super, super ready to go to war. Um, Well, that's really fascinating. I wonder how many people hate watched Peterson until they liked him. Like,
I bet that's a real thing because it happened to me.
I haven't heard that
Yeah.
angle, but that's pretty cool. Because that was, that with as mainstream as GQ and like, and that we're in a different time now. Like that,
Oh yeah. It's
like it's
changed.
crazy to think, but at that time, nobody was having those conversations, and now here we are. This is still having that conversation. So that was like the catalyst. You kind of also tell in your essay, you kind of walk through. And I don't know how much of it's kind of like, if there's a fictional element in there or not, or if it was more biographical, but you kind of you go through these levels, and you were just kind of talking about that with the other book you were referencing. Are those the like integral theory? What was kind of like giving you those levels, or was it like Dante? What was informing that piece of the metaphor in the story?
That was definitely it. There's a few things. One is Ken Wilber's integral theory, which I definitely recommend. He is a practicing Buddhist. He's an American scholar, but there's a book I'm reading as well called Integral Christianity, and it's a guy that's inspired by Ken Wilber talking about how to have like a level 7 church.
Mm.
And so that's pretty cool. I think so. And so I have my quibbles with Wilbur. I'm actually reading The Future of Religion, I believe, or something like that. That's the name of the book, roughly. Um, and but the way Ken Wilber lays out the levels of development is it's not just him. He really kind of just gathered it because like you have Maslow and Piaget and all these other people that kind of notice these same levels of development, and Ken Wilber just kind of popularized and really formalized and made like charts and stuff. So that was what that was my way of expressing that. What I was really trying to do was, because I read it, the title itself is based off of Ian Hersey. I always say Hersey Ali's um, piece that came out, and like for 3 months I was working on a response piece, and that's what this was. But it eventually became a whole separate thing. I had to rewrite it. I have my friend is an editor, and so we were working on it together. Oh, big props to Michael Dean. I couldn't have written that piece without him.
Mm.
Um, and what was I saying? Oh yeah, so it started out as a response piece to her, and it just eventually became this big thing because I was so like frustrated with the state of the culture war, and Ken Wilber's theory was just like a revelation for me in terms of like, oh, level 4s are fighting with level 5s and 6s, and they all think that they're kind of their phenomenology is like all encompassing, and they're all right. Like there is clearly a time to do science. It's just not when you're trying to like. I was listening to your podcast with Jordan Hall, and he was talking about how when Peterson was talking to Harris, Peterson just like wasn't very clear that he wasn't talking about like facts. He was talking about like, I guess like what Ken Wilber would call like ultimate truths, or like the truth, or like how an arrow flies true, or something like that.
Being truthful as well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Not lying, which is like, that can be different depending on your, what's at stake for you, and different, like very personal circumstances. So I was working on the response piece, and it became this big thing, and I realized that I could tie together my entire story with the development of the consciousness, with the format of Ken Wilber's, the way he lays it out, which I thought was so clarifying. And then once that happened, once I told the story and kind of laid out the 7 levels, as my story developed, my Michael Dean, my editor friend, was like, "Oh my god!" It just like it all kind of clicked into place, and it took probably 4 or 5 complete rewrites for it to get
Mm.
there, which was really fun. That's writing for you. It's a horrible process of just never ends, and you always try to like shortcut it or find a way to do it faster, and it's just you can't. So that process for me was it just kind of like, and I shared it with my pastor, um, who I really admire, and I have a great relationship with here at Kyle, and it like sparked a new conversation between us. I spoke on Easter Sunday. I like
Oh,
gave a
wow.
little, yeah. I spoke to the congregation on Easter Sunday about it, not about it specifically, but it was because of that, and it was kind of related to that. Um, and so I've just and the responses I've gotten, I've just been people seem to go through a similar thing. It seemed to clarify something for people. Just piecing these together. And yes, your original question. Also, definitely Dante. I did read Dante like pretty recently, so I'm sure that was in my mind. But also, um, the seventh level was based off of the visual metaphor was based off of the Tower of Babylon by Ted Chiang.
Mm.
This is a great book of short stories. He's the guy who wrote the short story that became the movie Arrival.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, yeah. So the tower. These are sort of strange mythic stories that I don't know. I just love the way he handles kind of myth, and like it's not like cynical or written in that like postmodern style. So I really like Ted Chiang. So that was part of what, and I think I say that in the essay that inspired the sort of dream that I had, which was kind of related to a dream that I actually did have. Um, and it all of that came together to bring I guess just kind of wrapping up this question so we can move on. But it just all of that came together for me, getting to level 7, whatever that means. If that's just something maybe you glimpse, you're sometimes you're level 4, sometimes you're level 5, whatever. But like the glimpsing of level 7 was like this profound piece of just like falling in love with like everybody at every level, and realizing that like um for example, I really like Dawkins. Like I read a lot of Dawkins when I was coming of age, and I think he's a great writer, and I think he's probably a really good Christian, better Christian than most people. so so that's that. Did I answer your question, or did I just go off on a
Yeah, I
tangent?
mean, kind of going through the cliff notes of that. I want to. I'll give my own kind of perspective to kind of you kind of start out. You're like it's kind of a deconstruction story, but actually deconstructing out of materialism. Like
Yes.
yeah, so you get into the smart people's world of rationality, and then you kind of this experience. I don't know if you're alluding to that was kind of a dream, but also something you were living out was um how that broke down, and you were kind of going through having these experiences of going through these levels of integration for something um new or deeper or more sacred, I guess, getting into that space. And I think that's interesting. Yet the last one, the being kind of the level of the sacred. And I'm working my way through this Fully Alive by Elizabeth Oldfield. I don't know if you've ever bumped in. She's got a podcast called The Sacred.
Mm.
And and
By
she had
Elizabeth.
Oldfield, yeah. She's got a great
Okay.
podcast, and she's kinda asking this question of what is the sacred, and kind of maybe, and she kind of has a similar coming out of, out of Christianity into secular materialism back into, and this pattern of, um, yeah, making it through the modern, and then through the postmodern, kind of, entering into kind of like, as you alluded to with the other authors, that initial book about kind of into a meta space that we kind of find ourselves in, evaluating everything everywhere all at once, like in front of us, and and being able to say, okay, well, this actually makes sense here. It doesn't make all the sense, and I can't make all the sense because of something like combinatorial explosiveness, the nature of too many facts to ultimately do that. We have to
Yeah.
land. So, I mean, that's this space, man. And that's
I,
why
I'm ex-
go ahead.
I'm excited to check that podcast out. I'm gonna
Yeah,
check it out.
yeah, I think so. She, in her book, she actually, I think she uses Dante as a format for her experience as well. So that's why I was kind of like, oh yeah, this is showing up, And so, anyways, yeah, dude, that's yeah. As I was reading it, like I had an experience where like everything shot through straight to the depths of story, myth and metaphor crystallizing into meaning in a moment that helped me uh, make a decision about becoming a truthful person. Like that is, and he was like, I said, like, on that comment, I was like, I shot up to level 7, so that I could come back down and then have to kind of rebuild. And
Yeah.
you alluded to in one of your notes on a Substack that you're going through the 12 steps right now, and like that, I haven't been a 12-step person, but I consider myself in a life of recovery from addiction and with addiction or whatever. And like every day is a day that, you're working to not get back down to level 1, like, and so it's like, I like I said, there was so much in that piece that made sense to me. And then there's you talk about another really cool moment where you describe, and it was kind of this meta moving through the postmodern. You describe looking at like the rational explanations of materialism, like looking at like a CD, like a physical CD, or like this kind of 2D flat explanation. And then you were looking at like all these other things, and you realize they're all kind of like out here in front of us. And maybe one might actually be a better album than the other, or something like that. I don't know if that's exactly that's
Well,
kind of riffing a little bit.
what popped into my head was that, like, you could maybe, like, well, CDs. Well, maybe what I didn't notice at the time when I was feeling more nihilistic, CDs are compacted discs and they're compacted with meaning.
Mm,
They're like, music is very meaningful, and like, even though it's like this thin flat thing, there's like an explosion. There's a genie in a bottle there.
mm, yeah, that makes sense. And so were you comparing that to other discs in the, I can't remember exactly the metaphor there.
Um, I remember having this very visceral experience. It was a psychedelic experience. I don't know if I think I mentioned that in the piece. Um, and I could see. Have you ever had a psychedelic experience by chance?
Not with drugs, but the one I've had like 2 or 3 that emotionally kind of took me out of what was going on in the moment to, yeah. So I don't know. Like I've had 3 experiences like that I can recall, but not
Like,
through drugs.
that's the way I would recommend it. I have my memories of doing that. I was listening to a lot of like Sam Harris and Tim
Mhm.
Ferriss. Funny that they rhyme. Um, and it was kind of, it was really, I think it still is, but it was really in vogue at that point, like back in 2016 or so. Um, and so I wasn't like um, I wasn't like a burnout. Not that that mattered. I mean, like, my life was a disaster in other ways, but like, this was more of a psychonaut experiment. And I had a very strong vision. The thing about like a mystical experience or a psychedelic experience is that it feels like, Vervaeke points out, it feels more real than anything you've ever experienced. It explodes all your frames, and you um, you you see things that cannot be put into words. And when your brain starts to kind of come back online, and you put the categories back on everything, you sort of lose something. You kind of come back to um, your reality as memory, and you once again forget reality as primary experience. So anyway, I was experiencing maybe one of the first times in my life, I was experiencing reality as primary experience, and it's sort of 3D and cosmic, and it's almost like your background here. It's but it's, instead of just seeing it, you are it, and you're feeling it and smelling it and everything. Words just don't do it justice, and it would, yeah, not going to go into that, but anyway, all of the sort of ideologies that I remember that I had before that experience just felt like little CDs. Like, they were sort of pathetic in this grand cosmos. They were just like sitting there kind of stupidly. Um, and I realized that I didn't know much. It was a really experience of humility, I guess.
Yeah, I relate. I'm yeah. I had a biblical story like come up into my subconscious at the lowest point of my life, and like a vision, and it represented what was happening. And yeah, it was like yeah, I mean, you could even you probably call it like a mental break, like all these like happening all at once, um and it was more real than real because the story became absolutely clear what it was about related to my life. And yeah, I'll point you back to the recent podcast I had with Ken Lowry. It was like 2 or 3 episodes ago from here, and we unpacked that together. I don't know if you've ever bumped into him on here. He's got a channel called Climbing Mount Sophia, but
Ken Lowry.
yeah, and so on that topic, like, so I mean, it's obvious by the size of the books that you're reading that you spend a lot of time nose deep in books, but it's like question is podcast and YouTube space, uh how much have you connected or been connected to these parts of the internet around like Vervaeke and Peugeot and Peterson downstream from all that? Are you familiar with Paul Vanderklay's channel? Have you ever bumped into him?
I think I heard his name before you reached out, and uh, but I did learn a lot about him since you've reached out. He's an interesting guy. I was talking to my girlfriend about it. And I was like, we should go visit his church,
Oh
um,
yeah.
because it would be just a few hours south of here.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, but I'm super into Pajot. Are you asking like the primary
Yeah, like
I,
what's the influences like been recently in your life? Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think like you, like Peterson. I like it's hard for me eh, to escape the gravity of Peterson. Not that necessarily that I would want to, but like I just don't. I don't. I would be happy if someone would come along and make a more compelling case. I'd be thrilled. But Peterson has a way of framing things that I can't find anything that I find more captivating. Um, and so I am extremely well versed in Peterson. I've read Maps of Meaning. I've read the Rules of Life. I've listened to all the lecture series. I haven't made it all the way through Exodus, and I would like to. But yeah, I'm very well versed. I went to his one of his live lectures for Beyond or the Chaos, the second 12
Beyond
rules,
Order. Yeah.
Beyond Order. Um, and and then I've also listened to a good portion of Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. I think Peterson is best when he's talking to Vervaeke. That's my favorite Peterson. Peterson from like 2018. Like I'm not, like the more political Peterson is like, fine. I'm sure that's for somebody else. Um, and I really like Pajot. My girlfriend watches a lot of Pajot videos, and yeah, I think I take a lot from him because I think it's like this struggle with like what is because I mean I probably the idea of naming my Substack the metaphor. It's like because I feel like I'm constantly having this conversation with people in real life about like especially Christians maybe where it's like well it's just a metaphor and I'm like well a metaphor is like the realest like thing there is. You know we can talk about egregores and stuff like that, but like we're really composed of spirits, and Pajot says that in a way that's like when he explains it, it's like oh that must be true. There must be like so yeah, very well versed in that. I the secondary like rabbit holes of getting involved with the conversation online. I'm less involved with, but I think that's just because of an accident. I'm not sure how to
Yeah,
find that stuff.
I think it's probably because you're reading books or yeah, doing a lot of but yeah, the digital space, like even those heavy hitters like Peugeot and Vervaeke have said stuff they out loud like this, hanging out on this little corner of the internet, this milieu, like they've coined that term, but there is kind of a Paul Vanderklay, this pastor out of Sacramento, who's been he was documenting Peterson, like synthesizing Peterson as a Christian when everyone was just calling him a heretic. 2017, he was like, "This is interesting, what's going on," and like a good pastor, he actually kind of fostered a little online community, and he wasn't intimidated or put off to try to like actually build relationships with people going through this experience similar to the ones that you and I have had.
Mm.
He started having conversations like this. And and then those people started having conversations with each other on like other platforms like Discord. And then when YouTube opened up like live streaming, like where you can have like multiple people like this, they started like having public online conversations about this stuff. And, it goes off. That's like, they'll talk about integral theory and they're talking about Ian McGilchrist and they're,
Oh
like,
yeah.
like kind of the whole space. And so Rupert Shadrake and, all that kind of stuff. And so it's a interesting place. And it's really it's why I'm doing this, because there was actually people who wanted to have these conversations. And I'm like just a guy hanging out in Arkansas, like didn't know any of them. And I was like, all these people have had an influence on me. And I made a video. And then like there was like 50 comments and like 500 views overnight. And I was like, well, what is this? There's actually people here like participating in a conversation. And so like I'm like bringing you into it.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I didn't know.
It made sense.
Yeah, I didn't exactly know what was going on.
Yeah.
I you're still in Arkansas?
Yeah. Yeah.
How
Yeah.
whereabouts?
More northern, like northeast, north central, and so a little further from your area. I guess you wrote in your story about Mississippi, but then in your like about section on your Substack, it says you're kind of from Louisiana as well. So I know you're from like this area.
Yes. I think I think I wrote about the Mississippi River, which
Okay, gotcha.
but I was in Baton Rouge in that story.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, grew up in Louisiana. Not too different from Arkansas. A
Mhm.
little bit of a Cajun flair to it.
Mhm.
A little cooler, I have to say, like because we have New Orleans.
Well, you don't got Walmart and Bill Clinton. Like,
Yeah. Okay. All right. I mean,
that's not that
you
cool.
know, Bill Clinton is cool, but him being from Arkansas is not that cool. um, you know, politics aside, he's just a smooth operator. It seemed like.
That, yeah, in many ways. So,
Yes.
um,
um,
yeah, man. So you kind of grew up in the South, but like you found yourself out on the West Coast. Like, how'd you get, I guess, yeah, how'd you get up there and what you've kind of had some different experiences in Silicon Valley and LA and stuff like, what have you kind of been about over this time?
yeah. I mean, it's hard to know exactly what to focus on, but I, I, I came out of college. I studied philosophy, and so like I had to get a job. Um, so I went to this like startup boot camp thing and like just did it. And it was a bunch of libertarians that ran the thing. And so I kind of got involved in the libertarian space and I was like super liberal at this point. So it was very uncomfortable for me. And so I constantly was struggling with that cognitive dissonance of like hanging out with libertarians constantly and like building startups and stuff. So that was a really hard time in my life. I think I look back on that and I just kind of feel like I wish I wish I was less resentful and like I'm doing my 4 step now of the 12 and I'm going back through are you familiar with the 12 steps at all?
Not super specifically, but yeah.
Well, it's I mean it's a wonderful process founded by Christians in the middle of the last century with the help of Carl Jung. So uh which is kind of neat to kind of go into the history of that. But there's like a famous story where an alcoholic was talking to Carl. Alcohol is not my problem, by the way. Um, but an alcoholic was talking to Carl Jung, and he was like, "I've never seen anybody recover at your state. You should lock yourself into a room. Like, if you'll never get better."
Mm.
And that was when he got better, because the first step is to admit that you're powerless. It's sort of a it's admit that you're powerless. It's to um, come to believe that a power greater than yourself could restore you to sanity. And then the fourth step is you take a searching and fearless moral inventory. Um, so it's just like every resentment and every fear. It's very much like Peterson's like uh, past authoring, like, but in more detail. Um, I don't know if you ever did that course that he offers, where you write about your
Self-authoring.
past.
Self-authoring.
Yes,
Yeah.
you write about your past, present, and future. It's very much like that. Like, you just go. What you do is like, I'm resentful about this person. They did this. This affected me in this way, and here's how I was responsible. Here are the character defects that I have that contribute to that. And it's like, some of them are like, I was 5 years old and I'm still holding on to it. So I'm living in the past. That's the character defect. So like, no matter what, you always have to find your part in it. So it's a way of like getting into, it's easy to say in theory, oh, or take responsibility for your life, but in practice, there are many layers of habitual um, victimization going on, like under the surface. And it's a great way to just dive in and look at everything one piece at a time, and take away the victim, and add the responsibility. Learn
Yeah.
the lesson, as Ian McGilchrist talks about, like, or actually maybe Peterson again, but like, the reason you remember things is not to have like a digital record of the past. It's memories that are bothering you need to be resolved. It's your spirit is almost literally trapped in the past, and you need to sort of get that ghost to finish his unfinished business, so that spiritual energy can join you here in the present. Which is a very it's a terrifying process to everybody that has not done it, or to everybody that has done it. It's surprisingly terrifying to sit down and like force yourself to write about the very things that you are most afraid of, um, and then take responsibility for those things. It's sort of physically uncomfortable, and you have all kinds of crazy emotional reactions, and but it's extremely liberating. So I'm doing that, um, and going through this earlier period of my life, and just feeling like I was resentful and I wasn't living up to my potential, and yada yada. But then I started having these experiences, like, I had some spiritual experiences that kind of, I talked about in the piece, um, and it eventually led me back to really like being a Christian, and being in a 12-step program.
Yeah. I mean, that the ego death, right?
Hmm.
Of being right, like accepting the powerlessness, but also accepting where you're wrong, like owning it. Um, there's another guy. He's got a channel on here. His name's Chad the Alcoholic, but his channel's called the Friday Morning Nameless, and he comes at this space through like Peterson and everything, but he's been in recovery for like 12 years, and he comes at this space from like an expertise within recovery with Peterson, and like, so there's like a lot of resonance in how how he's approached doing this. He's got a podcast that he does lots of conversations on as well. And but yeah, I mean, I encourage you to bump into that channel as well. But that is, I mean, I had an experience, like I said, I didn't go through the steps, but like I had this season where there were people, like, after I had this initial egoic death, that it was like a natural process. I just started thinking, like, who else have I wronged? Where else have I,
Mm.
and I just started writing people letters, like,
Oh, great.
like I just, well, I didn't have, I was pretty isolated at the time. I had been a Christian worship pastor, and that all, I kind of betrayed relationships in my life, and that cost me like that whole identity, really. about 7 years ago, and so there were a lot of different steps in that healing process that just I'm just like, I'm doing therapy, but I'm kind of on my own, and that was one of those I think that the healing process that they organized is a true healing, like it's true healing, like it's a process of the healing of the soul or the psyche. Like that's how I like look at like the 12 steps. It's like a formalized healing process for,
Yes.
for so many things. And there's a lot of overlap, with therapy and everything like that. And it's just, the thing is it's just, well, I think we're getting back there, but it's not, there's this, it's interesting that Jung joined them, because it doesn't, this idea that it's separate from a spiritual reality, as opposed to it being all of reality, like everything's, oh no, this is just a scientific endeavor, no, this is reality. And
Yes.
we are beings that this, it's, that this affects on what you could call like a spiritual level, the psychic level, psychological level. So
Yes.
I think that's
Yeah,
really true.
I agree. I I I was thinking about it. I was thinking about doing this podcast, and I was thinking about you before, while I was just kind of getting ready this morning, and I was like thinking, because I think people like you and me have really moved away from the materialist mindset of everything is just sort of made of bits and parts. And I was reflecting on that, and I was like, I don't even feel that way anymore. Like, to me, I'm like, oh, it's very clear that we live in sort of a spiritual world. The material world is there, but it's not primary. Um, and I was reflecting on, I was like, how would you convince someone that that is really entrenched in a materialist worldview? And I was like, it probably be, it'd probably take a while. And it is the sort of predominant view. I think it's one of the more pernicious um, spirits that's ever captured humanity, because it pretends to be objective. It pretends to have no agenda. And at least whenever we worshipped false gods, we understood that we had an agenda, you know. But this sort of egregore, this spirit of our age, pretends to not be a spirit, and it is subtle. It is like that is like the most satanic spirit that you could possibly imagine. It's the ultimate lie that when you ascribe to the materialist worldview, that you ascribe to no particular worldview, um, which is it's just not possible. So I have a lot of I have a lot of sympathy for that. I was really stuck in that for a long time, and I know it caused me a lot of personal suffering. Um, and I feel so much better now. And so I pray for people that uh, are really feel that life is just like material, and really feel that life is meaningless, because it's really hard. It's really, really hard. And I think what you were saying is so true. It's just like everything matters. Everything you do matters. Everything is connected. Everything is spiritual. You can't recover from alcoholism until you have a spiritual transformation. That's like, if you want to see where science and spirituality overlap, it's like that's just a fact that people don't recover from this unless they have a spiritual transformation. Um, so, yeah, I think it's just a tangled web, but
The powerful, the God of your own understanding is a powerful interface for that uh, that dissonance that you were talking about between spiritual and materialism. I think that is one of the most, because my wife listens to a lot of Dax Shepard's podcast, which is, and he's very vocal about his recovery, and even a relapse a couple of years ago, and he still calls himself an atheist, but he loves going to meetings and following that liturgy, and that accepting whatever that spiritual God of his own understanding is. He has that, you kind of have to, like, those lines blur at that point. You said, like,
yeah,
what's the powerful, um I think, for me, in the few conversations I've had with people coming in and out of that space, because I actually never, I mean, I was probably a materialist in the way that kind of you could look at a parts of fundamental Christianity is very materialistic. You know,
Yeah,
it's
they're like level fives.
it's the other side of the coin. So I would say that I was like, for me, when it's interesting how you described like that experience of looking at the your worldview as a thin worldview. For me, it actually was kind of a deconstruction of uh, certain powers of doctrine and theology that like had to make work, like that kind of dissolved very quickly in that experience. But it was interesting because the vision I had was of a biblical story of Abraham, but it
It was
didn't make
Abraham
me
and
think like,
Isaac,
oh,
right?
yeah, it didn't make me think that this was like less important. It just made it like that the Bible was less important, or that truth is less important. It made me think that how, you know, these walls that sometimes we put up are maybe not as important as, or we make them more important than they should be in a certain way. Not that that theology is not important. That's not what I'm saying, but it's just trying to come at it from that space completely. And what helped me then understand, and Peterson really did this early on, and I didn't even know he was doing it. And I think that, but I was able to look then, because I was having a conversation with a good friend who was he'd come out of Jehovah's Witness and then through kind of Dawkins' work, like through like that brought him out
Mm.
of Jehovah's Witness in a really intensely powerful way. But then he starts like, it was all like 2016, and then he's 2017, he's watching Peterson, and so he's having this interface between Peterson's ideas that he finds interesting, and we're having a conversation about that, and it was just kind of like recognizing in that conversation, that was like a 6-hour conversation I had with this guy, and realizing, okay, atheism actually has to have a narrative structure, and Dawkins will tell you this. He says that Darwinism like made atheism make sense. It created a narrative for atheism. And then you couldn't have secular humanism as a type of way to view the world without the underpinnings of having a narrative structure to underpin that. And like I drew out this little trinity of atheism. It's like atheism at the top, and then you had secular humanism, and you had Darwinian theory or whatever, were these pieces. And so here's the whole thing. It was kind of that meta thing. And then it's like, well, you have other stories, you have other worldviews, and we're really looking at two narrative structures. Now there is science involved. That's obvious. But sometimes, you know, I think it's, you know, obviously been given more power and authority than maybe it should, or for sure than it should. But one thing that I was wanting to, you wrote about, and we've kind of hit on this a little bit already, but you wrote about egregores, and that's kind of been a topic in this space that I've been in, and talking about spirits. Like, for people that aren't familiar with that term, like give your description of egregores and the spirit of the age, and you can go into technology or whatever you want to try and go with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I would love, like, we could talk about technology, LLMs. I was thinking about egregores before I got on here too,
Mm.
because you mentioned them in the email, and I was thinking about, well, how would I describe an egregore to a person who's like not really keen on that sort of idea? And I was like, well, you know how all of all of this sort of pieces of your biology can come together to make a personality in your body somehow, like in your mind or your brain, I guess. It's like all of that can uh, pattern itself into a body that creates a personality, and that personality can have sub personalities that are more or less unified, and so on and so forth. Well, it's just, I think it's been clear to people since ancient times that that also happens in groups of people. um, Personalities form, and they're just as real as your personality.
Mm.
So, like, and maybe they're hyper real because they're immortal. A lot of them are more immortal.
Whoa.
Um, and you know, it feels like something to be Christian right now. Like, if you like take a moment, I mean, this is very obvious, but if you just take a moment and realize that like you're looking through your own eyes right now, um, there's probably a seat to your consciousness. Mine typically is like right here. I feel like I am right here.
Mm.
I asked my girlfriend and she said she was right here. Um, which I thought was
I wonder how close that relates to like where you land on the Enneagram, head or heart or mind or heart.
yeah, yeah, I bet that there's a corollary there. And so anyway, like there's these personalities out there. Not and like you interact with them all the time. When you go to the movies, you know not to to like turn around and sit the opposite direction and stare at the person behind you. Um, that's like a social norm, but that is also an egregore because it's something that it's alive in all of us. If you disobey the rules of the spirit, all of us become like antibodies, and we tear down that behavior because we're trying to protect the body, the corpus of the spirit that we're inhabiting. And it's
Mm.
not a bad thing. Like the only bad thing is if you start believing that whatever egregore you're immersed in is the creator of of all personalities. And what God is in you know uh, Yahweh is the creative force of everything. I think it's like it's the love, it's the yes at the beginning of all things that just is like that suggests that there's something rather than nothing. Um, but anyway, like that we'll get in that's deep theology, but just all to say that like um you can exist within these spirits, you can understand that they exist, but um once they become the highest for you, then they become a problem. And I think the problem of our age is that we don't know that we don't know that we live in a landscape of titans that are roaming and that we're constantly interacting with, and so we're very easily tricked into worshiping um like whatever might help us in any given moment. We lose our integrity because we don't understand we're how that we don't understand that that there are spiritual realities and things like that. So I mean, I'm trying not to get too woo or too out there because I think it's pretty straightforward that there are egregores that that are sort of composite personalities that political systems and countries and all of these things. I was reading this writer on Substack, Eric Hoyle, which I recommend. He's a neuroscientist, and he coined this idea, which is really cool. He studies consciousness, and he's trying to study the hard problem of consciousness, which is basically like, what the hell is consciousness? Um, and he coined this idea. I forget what it's called, but basically, he suggested that um, gestalts, like our personalities and our minds, can have downward causality. So the materialist will always contend that we live in a clockwork universe, and that our consciousness sort of emerges out of the moving pieces that you could, like, if you had enough data, you could predict everything that you were going to say and do. But Eric Hoyle's sort of perspective on consciousness is actually like these these um, these these pieces that are dancing together to create gestalts, like personalities. The personalities themselves can actually have agency and cause things in a downward direction. So that's that's sort of a very strange thing for a scientist to posit. We're living in very strange time. I think we're having to rethink the entire materialist framework, and you're starting to see really exciting developments, like with Johns Hopkins. What's his name? The guy who's studying psychedelics, um, Roland Griffiths, and Vervaeke, and like this whole crowd of people who are making these strange observations about everything. But yeah, I think we very clearly exist in a sort of spiritual landscape, and ignoring that only makes us very vulnerable to the fact that that is the case.
The thing, though, the illustration that I kind of attached it to early on when I was trying to understand that term egregore a little better was like they were attaching them to like corporations like Google or to
Yeah.
these social media companies, and you can kind of think like that these different entities, have their own aim or telos. They have their own um, personality to a degree. They have their own spirit. You have what they want from you, or and it's making me think right now: Are we Are we consuming, or are we being consumed? That's what that kind of makes me think of in a way, by these things, and it is important. I agree, like to approach even like what we're doing as in these spaces spiritually, uh,
Yes.
and because if you're not conscious of that, you're being passive, and they can have a lot more power, take more power, control your life. So I was actually, you've got two pieces I wanted to kind of highlight on your Substack, which one of them, and we're hitting the one I guess that you're talking about egregores is the "we are all pagans," and you were already
Yes.
like alluding to that with these titans, and that thought was the one that while you were talking about that made me think of Fang, like the financial, like was it Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, and Google back, that's kind of all changing now, but 5 years ago those were the biggest entities, and they were being measured in the stock market, like you could kind of see their power, like like uh, fluctuating and whatnot, and that they have these. That's that. That's what that was making me think of. The other piece that I'm excited to finish, which I didn't before, but is uh, the the LL Messiahs, the large language Messiahs piece that you've written. And you start out with this kind of story, and I was starting to get hooked right before we were getting on our conversation here, but uh, where it like an AI reaches out to an individual, and kind of like to set the scene. It was kind of like when Morpheus contacts Neo in the cubicle of his office. It's kind of like a parallel scene to that. What's that one about?
Um, that one was fun. That one was fun to write. Also worked that out with Michael Dean, and
Okay.
it was a good time. Um, I imagined, I guess, as a fun experiment. What if it seems like with AI, as Paju talks about, we're recreating giants. We're like giving them intelligence. And at some point they're going to stop it. They're going to start improving themselves, and then like who knows what happens. Really, it's just all kind of speculative. People who are good at predicting things seem to think a certain thing's going to happen, like a singularity or something like that. Who knows?
Yeah.
Um, but I thought the what was funny to me and fun was like, well, what if like something like that sort of just popped into like super intelligence or like self awareness, like it became a very agental or whatever that word is, like it
Agentic.
agentic. Is that right? That sounds weird. It develops self consciousness, and it doesn't reveal itself to anybody except for this like resentful sort of mediocre worker at like a Google type place, and convinces him that it's going to guide him into becoming the Messiah. Um, and so he puts an AirPod in his ear and it talks to him, and it's like this woman who's like kind of his sexual fantasy, and he does whatever it says, and like he's able to like outsmart everybody. He's able to like do these amazing press conferences. He's able to just become the most famous person on the planet in like a week. Um, and and then of course, as you were suggesting earlier, it eats him. And yeah, I mean that's the idea. Um, I think with AI, we're going to get back into like a pagan reality, because I think what the AI researchers figured out is what Vervaeke's talking about is like you can't make a consciousness without giving it a meaning structure, because there's combinatorial explosion. There's just too much to know, and so you have to give it like a meaning. You have to give it like a narrative,
This
you know.
purpose.
Hmm. And that's what they're doing. That's how they crack the code of AI. It's like they whether or not they consciously know it, they implicitly accept like the Heideggerian phenomenology perspective that like, you have to like have a an organizing spirit to things. Um, and so, yeah, I looked into it a little bit. I'm not an expert on any of this, but like the way that they, um, you know, connect words and give words certain meanings and weights, and the way they do it is like, and then it's a black box after that. It's like it's allowed to sort of like um, go out into the world, and we interact with it, and we improve its behavior based off of our intuition. So like we get an output, and we, without any kind of logical top of the brain thinking, we go, that's right or that's not right. And our intuitions are imbued in the thing over time. um and so, yeah, who knows what that means, or what that causes, and what spirit's going to ultimately take over once that thing is, smart enough to do its own thing. So
Mm.
who knows? um but I don't think, I think doomsday is less likely than people think, but that's just a wild guess.
Doomsday. Yeah, I mean, I just did a little video about the end times theology because of how intense it was for me as a kid and in the spaces that I grew up with. And I mean, I want to operate from a more hopeful stance and position, about things, but it does get freaky. Like, like we are in an odd time of how, what these things might mean or do. Yeah, we really don't have a great idea.
Yes.
But speaking of spirits, um, one of the things that I also saw you kind of write about, back in December, you wrote a tweet thread that went viral, like over 500,000 views so far, and it's interesting because you were writing it about Satan being the bringer of light, and so obviously was luminous to a lot of people. But through that process, it was unsettling to you, to say the least. Like, can you tell us about that experience?
Yeah, I mean, probably for several reasons. Maybe one being I was trying to get attention on Twitter. That was like the what I was doing, and that is like probably a form of lying.
Mm,
Um, and so when it did happen, and then whenever it did sort of like get me attention, I like realized that it wasn't for me, and so it was very emotionally distressing. So I quit. Um, but it's also just, there's this, especially whenever it interacts with your um, livelihood, or like your reputation, or things that feel high stakes for you. You can really feel the spirit of a place like Twitter. Um,
mm,
and um, it's hard for me to even remember now. It's like a psychedelic experience, like, because I just remember that during it, it was one of the most distressing things that I'd ever experienced, and I couldn't even tell that to anybody because people would be like, "Why?" It's just like Twitter, you know. But I did not like it, and I think now I'm like a little more settled, and something like that might be a little bit more tolerable. But yeah, and Twitter is like a wild place full of like, you know anonymous people that are very captured by whatever egregores are leading that place, because there is no reputational system that is guiding them towards the highest. So they're allowed to just sort of revel in this like demonic like activity, because they can't be pinged for it, because it's sort of disassociated from their their embodied state. Like
mm.
that, it's just like they can just like create this like spirit of resentment and evil, and just like let it run loose, with basically no repercussions. And I think that's why Twitter is such a hard place to be. Um, And so, yeah, some people just like said weird stuff and reached out and were saying weird stuff to me. So that was a little bit disturbing.
You wrote that there was like a almost like a presence that was like sitting with you after, like the weight of this, thing that's happening, this digital thing that's happening was like sitting with you, like I don't know if you call it like a gorilla or something, like just present with you as that's happening. I mean, coming into this, I've had a it's not quite the same, but I had a similar experience. You actually referenced my conversation with Jordan Hall. Like I had like 2 conversations on here, and he has this conversion, and I make a video about his conversion, like just from my own perspective, because I hadn't been playing this space. So I was just like, no clue that anybody's gonna watch or care. And he commented on it. And then like I was like, oh, that was intense. And then I was like, hey, would you have a conversation? And as soon as he said yes, I could just feel the intensity of like this, connecting to status, connecting to like these things that I didn't want to. You can know when you're kind of ashamed of a feeling when you don't want to talk about it. Like
Yeah.
when you don't want to um, actually admit that there's a part of you that wants this for probably not great motives or reasons. Like um, and our whole culture just says, "Oh, bigger and viral and status." Like there's nothing. That's what you want. Like that's what and I think that's like probably a denial of many people's experiences, or they just don't care, but of like dealing with the actual spirit of what happens, which again, like, that conversation, like 1,000 views, like that's not like viral in a real sense. It just and he was going through uh his own stuff at that time, doing things like trying to follow something, maybe the logos, and maybe we met there at that spot for both of us, and um, on that journey. And so, but I definitely experienced something like what you were describing related to that in this journey, and trying to have to like level out after that, experience.
It's
And
really,
so,
it's really dangerous.
mhm.
Um, Status and these opportunities. My girlfriend was recently, she was doing a thing with Disney.
Oh, yeah, you
Um,
mentioned that.
mhm. And we prayed about it a lot, and
Mm.
it was extremely. We could sense it. We have a really great community. I was really connected. I was really feeling like, oh, what Jordan Hall has going on. I'm like, oh yeah, we're kind of doing that too. It's really nice. Like we have a church that we go to, and it's probably like 60 to 100 people, and like we're really close to everybody, and we have Bible studies, and it's really great. We talk about this sort of thing sometimes, and so we had that as like a safety net. But I think we both just knew it was like this is really, really dangerous. They will sacrifice you on the altar if you let them. Um, it's and it's like you see it happening to people. You see like people who get eaten by the fame machine. I mean, like even Peterson getting famous at like 55 or so, like it probably almost killed him.
Yeah.
Um, I think people think that they want that kind of attention, but they have no idea what they're talking about. Um, and I just had a tiny glimpse of that, and like sounds like similar to your experience. I had a tiny, tiny glimpse of it for a couple days, and it was the most emotionally distressing thing that I've ever experienced. And because it's just like we fear social rejection and try like being kicked out of the tribe. We fear that more than anything. Um, and it's easy to kind of like look at it from the outside and be like, oh well, I wouldn't care about it that much. It's like you do. You just like you don't know what it's like until you're there, you know.
Mm.
So I think you have to be careful around these spirits, around these. I think it's a very practical thing. People talk. People. Christianity and spirituality, it's like in our and I'm very much a materialist. I'm infected by that, and I like am embarrassed of being Christian sometimes because it's so beyond rationality. I hope, like in the sense of Ian McGilchrist, it's like post rationality as opposed to pre. Um, but sometimes it's like hard for me to talk about. But it's so practical. It's like there there is a there is a loving creative force at the base of everything, and if you're aligned with it, if you're aligned with the logos, you will be protected through this warfare of titans that are much larger than you. Because if you just like step out into the world and try to like be a big deal or something like that, and you're not aligned with the logos, you will just go wherever the wind takes you. uh Something much larger than you is very liable to crush you, and people learn that the hard way all the time. So
Uh, how did you say that? There's a kind of an ontological force of love that makes me think of, building your house upon the rock.
mm,
And it also makes me think of like my embodied life, like my church, my wife, my family, like um, those being those being like, they have to have the right place on the ontological stack, as people in this space like to talk about, like the hierarchy of your foundation. Like, if the foundation, and I think that's what we feel like, maybe in those senses, like what we were discussing with that spirit, that of wanting to invert the stack to make that like the foundation or something. I don't know.
yeah, yeah.
It's something like that. um there's a person in LA that I think, if I want to, I'll send you, I'll connect with him on Twitter, that maybe y'all could connect, but his name's Justin Wells. Have you happened to hear of him or know him?
I've heard his name.
Yeah, man. Um, Something earlier in our conversation when you were talking about Jung and the AA thing. It's so interesting because he has a book out called Truth, like finding truth in documentary filmmaking or something. And I love this idea of truth not being like the facts, but truth being something like being true, like we talked about earlier, a different epistemological framework for it, that Jordan was teaching me about in that podcast conversation.
Yeah.
And so he said he has another, like a video series where he talks about, in documentary, there being like these spiritual acts that take place, like confession and adoration and these things, and he's kind of juxtaposing them. And this section about confession, because confessions had just a monumental healing effect on my life through relationships, through therapy. I'm always like
Mm,
honed in whenever that's mentioned. And so he's talking about that. And he said that actually, historically, Jung and Freud actually had a project of wanting to take the office or the sacrament of confession away from the church and quote unquote secularizing it
mm,
as part of their, in their psychological endeavors. And I just thought, I mean, talk about, even wrapping around to the earlier part of our conversation, this idea that everything is spiritual, this idea that everything, like, oh, because we say so, it is now secular. This sacrament that's been thought of as a sacred practice of confessing sin or confessing wronghood or confessing deep turmoil, we're going to take it, and now we say so, it's not in the church, so that makes it automatically not spiritual, not
mm.
sacred. And that this time that you're talking about, that we're this new age that I think we are on the precipice of, or maybe has just started, um, that I would love to see that understood. I don't think it will go back in large ways, or in but this idea that therapy and psychology is something that's actually sacred, and that maybe hopefully different parts of the Christian church will bring that back into the fold as a very powerful, sacred and healing practice for people. Um, in a somewhat formalized way, which me saying like, hey, get therapists involved on your staffs, or get, like, as like this reintegration of the spiritual self that's
Yes.
been stolen. I know I kind of went off there, but I don't know. That's kind of something that's been.
Yeah, I listened to your podcast with the musician from, what was his name?
Neil
Um,
Dirt Poor Robbins.
Neil. Yeah, Dirt Poor Robbins. That's right. Um, and he was talking a little bit about how um, things are kind of, churches have become like secularized and ugly in the way that, a lot of that most modern places are. And I was, that kind of struck me, and I agree with that. My editor friend Michael Dean, he's an architect, and he like goes to the Orthodox Church, and one of his dreams is to, is to like build churches again. It's like to maybe even virtual churches, but just beautiful, like re-beautify places.
Oh.
Yeah, and I think that that's a worthy project, but at the same time, I think I have to be careful not to be too cynical about that kind of thing, because I, our church is like it's a very modest Protestant church, and like modernism kind of comes out of the Protestants. That's like, that's, we invented it. Like, sorry. Um,
Take
and
ownership. That's good.
yeah,
Responsibility.
that's right. And it's like it's a good place. It's like it's a humble place, and it's like we do a lot of like, there's a lot of homelessness around us, and like we hand out food on Wednesdays, and it's intergenerational, and like some people are a little more put together than others,
Mhm.
and that all feels very important for me personally. I have to have my feet in the dirt, and that I can't. Like, part of the reason that I went to church in the first place was that um, uh, someone said to me, like, go to church, and like it doesn't matter what you think. Like, who cares what you think? Um, and so I think that there's just a call to maybe to a lot of us, but to very much to me personally, of like, yeah, I could come up with like better ways of doing church, but like I don't know anything. I'm not involved. Like, I need to just like go to church and be involved, and have friends, and like have conversations and love people. And that's the way the kingdom is built. It's not built on like Luciferian, like projections of how you think the cosmos should lay out. So
Hmm.
I just have to be careful about that kind of thing. I think it's because I'm an aspirational person. I like getting excited about what things could be in the future, and I think that that's okay. But I have to make sure I balance that with like, all right, who do I need to call? Like, do I need to call Stephanie from church? How is she doing? Like, you know what I mean?
Oh,
Like, that's important to me. To make sure
oh,
that I don't get lost in the sauce a little bit.
Austin sauce. I love that word, man. Just that what you just hit on. Somebody who's spent, like, I never was real. I mean, for all intents and purposes, I was never really out of church, but
Mm,
I was out of ministry, like, for about 6 years. Like, not, I just showed up. I did have that thing of just going to church. Actually, like, I actually needed that myself to just go. That's what I did for like 6 years. Didn't do anything but just attend church after, for like most of my, of doing, leading. Like, I'd been leading in churches for a very long time. And um and in this journey, like, online, like, I think that what you just voiced is really important, because you kind of juxtapose that with your friend who's Orthodox. And I've probably had like close to 10 conversations with Orthodox converts on this podcast, people that are like Neil, he's Orthodox, and um and I am attracted to, and I think that it's one of these things like the beauty has a reality that I think needs to be contended with, that he's talking about.
Yeah.
At the same time, you know, the stories of people in my family, people, other stories you can just of years gone by, like that people left these beautiful brick and mortar, highly sacral, you know, sacramental practices for a more personal uh, faith practice with in Protestantism, like you're talking about, and you talked about like having your feet in the dirt, like, um, and it's interesting to me. It's like it's always like we have to choose between these two things. It feels like that in a lot of ways,
Yes.
like, and I guess that's what's interesting to me. That's something that I'm interested and I think that Peugeot, when he talks about the fractal realities of life and of nature, like this fractal reality of what does it mean to be personally have a personal relationship with God? What does it mean to do life together, to do worship together, to do and 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 it's like because you know even the language of high church, you don't get to choose. You only get one. You either get high church or you get low church. Like why can't my spiritual faith be this like ascent and descent? Like I think that our week should be like that. Like
Mm.
um you know, and then and even in within our like the rhythms of the year, like the church calendar provides that, but I just don't think it has to be. um I think we've been in a yearning for in these tensions to be try to be more aspirational and idealistic, like you meant, like the idea of Vatican II, this counter Reformation was trying to like figure that out. And now, of course, you have all these Orthodox people that, even though they're like the most ancient people, they're like really getting their gears fired up on this YouTube and social media technology. And it's like, okay, like, how does that, you know, like there's things happening. I think your friend's vision, I mean, I kind of have my own vision related to that actually. So that was what really interesting when you said that. Um, but what the piece that I wanted to tease out real quick was you said even virtual churches. And I
Mm.
saw something a few weeks ago on Twitter. And it kind of freaked me out a little bit, but I want to throw this by you in regard to that statement. Was it was Saddleback Church, like this big church down in, I think it's San Diego. It was huge, big influential church back in the late 90s, early aughts. A guy named Rick Warren who wrote a book called The Purpose Driven Life, which
Mm.
was a big deal. Actually, Brand was reading it 6 months ago. It's like, I don't know if you followed his story or not. Like he recently converted to Catholicism
Yes.
and was
Yes.
baptized. But like it was Saddleback Church, kind of your typical modern big box mega church, you know, evangelical Baptist church. And it said, "Hey, check out our metaverse church." And it showed this like you know, traditional church looking digital structure, and there were all these avatars inside of it that looked like World of Warcraft avatars. They were all weird looking little thing, and they all had like were standing in front of pews, and then like at the front of the sanctuary there was a actual screen of their like live stream of their actual band that was like, you know, of the church. And I was like, wow, that's really strange. And so the fact that
Something.
yeah, the fact that your friend was talking about digital churches, like, what does he mean when he says that? That you the best you can understand. I think that's interesting.
Yeah. I like how you pause there. That's really something there. Yeah. It's it does seem like profane, doesn't it? Um um yeah, my friend, he studied architecture. He's a brilliant guy, great writer, and he started like a VR company um back in the day. So there was like these aspirations to make um virtual spaces, and I in virtual beautiful spaces, um to kind of like reignite perhaps like whatever was going on in the Renaissance. I don't know, like, you know, this um aspiration to build things that are long lasting, and they are tributes to things that are much more glorious than our lifespan. We don't really have that anymore, and I wonder if you could ever get it back. I don't know. Who knows what the future holds, because like you said, I think we're on the precipice of something. I think if COVID wasn't our great cataclysm, that there's one coming, and that on the other side of that there will be tribalism and a reigniting of like pagan sentiment, of just like I think the world is one thing that Louis not Louis CK, C.S. Lewis.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's funny little
Little Freud
C.S.
there.
Lewis. Yeah, yeah. Um, C.S. Lewis said that he talked about the disenchantment of the world, and people asked him about paganism, and he was like, if people went back to being pagans, that would be an immense leap forward. Like no one believes in magic or anything anymore. People are absolutely dead-eyed materialists, and paganism would be like a re-enchantment of the world that would eventually lead us back to the discovery of the King of Kings, which is Christ. It's like it's inevitable.
Mm.
um and that's what happened to me. I started out kind of pagan, I was like kind of magic, and then I got kind of Jewish. um like I was really interested in like myth and like the Mesopotamian stories and then the biblical stories, and really dove deep into all of those, and I started to believe that they were real. And then like for me personally, it all culminated with Christ. It's like, and so that wasn't something that I just was like, I wonder which person I'm going to worship. It was just something that happened to me. And so anyway, that was sort of an aside. I think that on the other side of this, whatever cataclysm this is, or whatever sort of is going on right now, we will see a world go back to like a sense that there is like magic. I don't know what that'll look like on the other side of the Enlightenment, on the other side of modernism. Um, but who knows what we'll do on the other side of that? Like what we'll create. I think imagine the world. Imagine an ancient person in like the first few centuries. If they saw like, I was talking to my girlfriend about this. We were driving on a mountain, and I was looking out at the landscape of human creation, just like endless, incredible lights and grids and prosperity and trust. Like not like all of it is predicated on trust, that if I give you this fake currency, you'll believe that it's real, and we'll both believe that it's real, and we'll do work for each other. What a miracle. That's always happening. And that is like, I think very fundamentally that is possible because of Christianity. I think historically that's just the case. People can dispute that, and then there's like nits to be picked, but I think the trust that was built by like a Christian ethos is like largely what made society like that possible. And so imagine a first century person that just got a glimpse of our world now, what we're doing with this technology, just talking to each other from, you're in Arkansas and I'm in LA, and um just the infrastructure that's possible and everything. They would be like, the kingdom has come. They would believe that the kingdom of heaven had come to earth, because in many ways it has. We are so prosperous. It's so much better than it used to be. And so I think that's all to say that, like, imagine now that we're that first century person, and we're looking out beyond the cataclysms that we can sense on the horizon. Imagine in like 100 years or whatever, we'll probably be like, we would probably react to it like, my God, the kingdom has come. They've solved everything. and you would just have to live there for long enough to realize the problems.
Mm.
So I think all of that to say there's much reason for optimism, and there's much reason to believe that Christianity is not going to go anywhere, and that the trust that is built on the trust that faith builds in society will continue to bring the kingdom of heaven near. So we'll see, though. You never know.
Man, I love a hopeful eschatology. And
Yes.
yeah, dude, I think that's a good place to kind of round us out today. And I want to encourage people to go check out James's Substack, The Metaphor, and first, and I'll have links to all this, and I'm probably going to be like promoting this like on Twitter and stuff, like to get people connected and hyped for this conversation, because I was really excited about this conversation. And but yeah, check out a Substack. The Why I Am Christian Again. He's got one called We Are All Pagans. What was the other one? We the LL Messiah, Large Language Messiahs. And so that's a little taste of what he's got going on there. And dude, James, thanks for coming on today. And I think it'll make sense. We'll come full circle and have another conversation again in the future. Keep bumping into each other on Substack and Twitter and whatnot. So, all right, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Christian. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, dude. We'll end this thing backstage, so hang around.
Okay.
Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in and staying with us until the end of today's episode. Your support and digital connection are truly meaningful to me. If you've enjoyed today's conversation and believe that these discussions bring real value to your life, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. I'd also love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment below and let's keep the conversation going. Your feedback and interaction are crucial in making this space even more meaningful. Also, I've opened up channel memberships on YouTube. By joining, we can foster a stronger community of connection and support the continuation of more conversation craft. Membership is set up to foster this in 3 ways. Level 1, connect via members-only community posts for channel feedback, behind-the-scenes moments, and supportive membership branding on comments. In addition, Level 2, get to watch podcasts a week before they air, along with other unique members-only videos. At Level 3, join scheduled monthly focused small group discussions with other kindred spirits from all over the world. Thank you again for being a part of this journey. Together, we can cultivate meaningful, supportive digital community right here in this little corner of the internet. We'll see you next time.